Hi everyone, and welcome to Module 7, Part 2, Learning Media Assessments and Learning Modalities for Students with Visual Impairments. I'm going to be hanging out down on the bottom of the screen so I can show you a couple of assessment tools, but this presentation is really to kind of talk about literacy. Moving on from the little essays that you guys are writing, wrote last week, and to talk about some assessment tools and what teachers of the visually impaired, what their role is when it comes to literacy for our students. So the PowerPoint I've created is called Literacy for Students with Visual Impairments, including multiple disabilities. And so I want to talk about children with multiple disabilities specifically, and also give you general tools for students with visual impairment. And some of these are things that you've seen before. Some of them might be new to you, new resources. This presentation was adapted from my literacy teacher at UMass Boston, Tammy Reisman, and also my good friend and a graduate of the University of Northern Colorado, Lana Mason, who is the administrator of the New Mexico State University program for teachers of students with visual impairments. She's a super smart lady, and she did a great presentation at Getting in Touch with Literacy. I can't plug that conference enough last December, and so I took some of this stuff from her and put it in here. Okay, so what is literacy? We've kind of started this discussion already, and I think that you probably hopefully reflected on what literacy means to you and what literacy might mean for your students. It's a developing process that begins at birth and occurs in stages. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Literacy begins at 6 months old. Research has found that the parents think that literacy and book learning really doesn't begin, language learning really doesn't begin until 2 years, when children really start to talk, more like the rest of us. But literacy really begins at birth. It begins very early, and literacy is highly linked to communication. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about your students with multiple disabilities who developmentally are maybe in those earlier stages. Literacy is also considered the cornerstone of education. So without literacy learning, people do not have the same opportunities as people with literacy have. That's been shown time and time again in all different populations. This is a quote from Canning and Holbrook. The use of reading, writing, and other tools to gather and understand information and convey important information to ourselves and others. That's really a traditional view of what literacy is. The ability to communicate and derive meaning from a set of socially recognized symbols. That's another view of what literacy is, and that's sort of what I consider a more progressive view. So socially recognized symbols, think about what that means. That means things like a McDonald's sign. That means signs on doors. That means things in the community. What kind of meaning do those hold for your students? And there's a quote at the bottom from Copeland and Keefe, and I had the advantage of having Susan Copeland, the author of this quote, for a class at the University of New Mexico, and she teaches literacy for everybody, and she's a great teacher. So if you can get your hands on any of her research, it's well worth reading. But she and Keefe said in their 2007 book, which I have somewhere, but I was going to tell you the name, but no longer a set of particular skills. Literacy refers to a status that accords people opportunities to communicate and to have access to the information and technologies that make possible self-determined participation in one's community and broader society. And I love that quote. That quote really sums up what literacy means. Literacy means access to information. And that is why it is not a universal given across the board. Okay? And that's very notable for our students with visual impairment. So the facets of literacy skills for students with visual impairment are broken down into 3 categories, and I'm going to try to do this briefly, but this will probably be a longer lecture. Emergent literacy skills, academic literacy skills, and functional literacy skills. What are emergent literacy skills? Emergent literacy is the process of developing literacy that begins at birth and ends when children begin to engage in conventional reading and writing. Okay. And it is a lifelong literacy skills are a lifelong endeavor, and so this kind of breaks it down into the 3 sections across the lifespan. Academic literacy skills are the basic reading and writing skills taught in conventional literacy mediums during elementary and middle school years. Functional literacy skills are the application of literacy skills and the use of a variety of literacy tools to accomplish daily tasks in the home, school, community, and work setting. So again, that really lends itself to our students with multiple impairments, students that maybe aren't traditional readers and writers, but students that still need access to literary information and they still need access to media. What does that look like in the home, in school, community, and work? What does the TVI do to teach and facilitate literacy instruction and learning? So we provide direct, consistent daily instruction in early Braille skills and beginning Braille skills. We provide direct instruction in unique literacy skills, and that encompasses the needs of our learners with multiple impairments, including those with deaf blindness. We provide direct instruction in Braille reading and writing to dual literacy learners. How do we foster literacy development? We teach the integrated use of vision skills and the use of optical and non-optical devices to our students with low vision. And we collaborate with general education teachers and other team members to integrate students with visual impairment into literacy instruction and provide access to that instruction and materials. So that is twofold, and those are two very important responsibilities. One thing is that you help the teacher to understand how the student is integrated into instruction, and then also you provide the teacher and members of the team with tools to help the student access the media, and you provide the student with those tools so that they eventually will be able to do so independently and accommodate their own visual needs. Okay, so this is just a couple of, this is by no means exhaustive list, but this is just, the next slide is assessment of literacy skills, and I've broken it down into 2 sections, tools on one side and guides on the other. And so these are just some tools for you to check out if you want to as you're going through your career. And please don't be overwhelmed. Please keep in mind that if you are working with mentor teachers of the visually impaired, they probably know about this stuff. And if you're working in a school district, you probably already have these books. And if you don't have them, you can easily order them. Just Google them. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them anywhere. You can get them secondhand sometimes. And you'll notice that all of them are fairly dated, and that, of course, is true in our field, that we just kind of use old stuff. But you want to make sure and check that these have been updated to use Unified English Braille Code, because that is the new code that we have adopted universally in, I believe, 2016, but it might have even been 2015. UEB is a code that is used so that it can standardize Braille across all English languages, and it does away with some old Braille rules that really didn't apply anymore, and it puts forth kind of easier rules for technology, citing technology, and that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind when you're looking through these. But you'd still be, even if they're outdated, that way you'd still be able to use pieces of them for your own, when you have early Braille readers and things like that. So this is just to kind of give you an idea, but again, just make sure that they're up to date, because I did not get a chance to go through and do that for everyone. So the assessment of Braille literacy skills is called the ABLS, and I have an example here that I'm holding up just to show you what the cover looks like. It's actually a pretty simple packet that has a bunch of different forms in it that you can fill out. This is from the, I believe it's from Texas School for the Blind. You can order it. And it has emergent literacy. It basically has the mechanical sort of checklist for how students read and write, and I find it helpful to kind of know what those skills are. And actually, this is up to date, because it's really just kind of about what you need to do in order to read Braille. And so it's actually really helpful to give you an idea and a background in it. And there is a contracted Braille part and composition parts, and most of those will probably still apply to UEB, so I don't think you have to worry about it being outdated. But it's a nice resource, and it's unlike a lot of the books that we have, it's really easy to carry around. It's a little slim assessment book, so that's kind of nice, and you can make copies and use it for multiple kids, the parts that you want to assess. So the Minnesota Braille Skills Inventory is another one, and this is a skills inventory that looks at too all of those features. I don't know how big it is, though. I have not used it myself, but I do know that it's a valid inventory for Braille. The Diagnostic Assessment of Braille Readiness Skills from Koenig and Holbrook is also great. And we've already talked a little bit about what diagnostic assessment means. I've given you an article about it. And there is also on what diagnostic teaching means. And there's also page 13 of the Koenig and Holbrook Learning Media Assessment Resource Guidebook has information about that in it. So for guides, there are, and these are books that provide you with guidelines about how to teach Braille. They're super useful. And I know that quite a few of them are actually pretty small paperback books, that you could easily find. So instructional strategies for Braille literacy, beginning with Braille. That's a great one. It's got a lot of games in it, a lot of motivating Braille activities. Foundations of Braille literacy and foundations of low vision. So, what does this have to do with the learning media assessment? Well, the learning media assessment, you're going to make the decision about what to teach the child. And then after you make a decision about what to teach the child, you're going to have to assess those Braille skills, when it's time to record notes on progress. And that's really an ongoing process. To figure out how the kid is doing and kind of where to start with the kid. And so these are all sort of tools that you want to have available. And again, a lot of them are going to be, you're going to get a lot from the people that you work with about, what to use, and do they already have copies of these, and are they available to you? Okay. So I just wanted to give you a little overview of them, and then I'll provide a list with some assessment, where you can get them, in the module as well. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the traditional process of the LMA versus what we might do for students with multiple impairments, multiple disabilities, and deaf blindness. So when we look at the traditional process of the LMA, we have preferred sensory channels, we have learning materials and methods, and then we select a literacy medium. And these are sort of the things that we really take into consideration, especially the sensory channels, and then looking at what they already use and what methods they already use that are successful, and then building on those or changing them if they're not working. So, and then choosing a literacy modality. So this is a quote that Lana had shared from Lori Heinzman in the National Center on Deaf Blindness to talk a little bit about what literacy means, and why, and how to kind of shift a little bit the way we're thinking about what reading and writing are. So it says, to achieve literacy, there must be reading. To achieve reading, it must be meaningful. To achieve meaningfulness, there must be communication. To achieve communication, there must be experience. To achieve experience, there must be opportunity. And to achieve opportunity, there must be care and understanding. So I want you to take this to heart and think about what this means, and what reading means, and what meaningfulness means when it comes to experiences that your students have, and how important communication is when it comes to this. Okay, so that's just kind of a little inspirational quote almost, to kind of see if you can shift your thinking a little bit on what literacy and what reading mean, and what are the foundational tools that you need to be able to do that. So I've put a list up of tools for learners with visual impairments and multiple disabilities. And there's a book that is not required for this course. It's available from the Texas School for the Blind, and it's called Teaching Students with Visual and Multiple Impairments. I'm sorry, I've lost okay, sorry about that. I'm getting slacked all the time here. Teaching Students with Visual and Multiple Impairments, okay, and it's by Millie Smith and Nancy Liback. And it's again produced by I'm sorry, all my notifications keep coming up on the corner of my screen. I'm going to move my little, you can probably still see me though, even if that happens, but I can't see you. Okay, so this is a great book, and this book is full of tools to use with students with deaf blindness and students with multiple impairments. And so if you don't have it available in your library, at your work, or at school, I would definitely recommend getting this. And I'm going to include some scanned things from this this week in the unit. But great book, very thick, very thick, but super easy to read, and also has helpful things in the appendices